I'm excited to look at the passage before us this morning, especially when you look at our Old Testament reading and you then hear the words of Paul in our New Testament reading. You can feel like they just contradicted one another. David is praying that his enemies will be defeated, physically harmed, literally, Lord, kill them because they're evil, they're not right, get rid of them, get them out of my life. They rebuke you, they rebuked me, and so he's praying for their destruction. And I can resonate with that. The guy cuts you off, give him a flat tire, Lord. I hope he runs over a nail. And it's just like, I don't know if that's a one-to-one correlation, but that's what I do. And we feel bad though. It's like, shouldn't we be praying? Like, I should be praying for their salvation. I should be praying for patience. I should be praying not for their destruction. Is David in the wrong? Because Paul says, as much as it's up to us, we're supposed to be at peace with everybody. We're supposed to respond to evil, not with evil, but with good. Does that mean we just overlook everything? And if even bad things are happening, we just sit back on the sidelines and we're being nice? Or is Paul wrong? Is David wrong? Or can there be balance? Good luck with that. But I think there can be. I always talk about grace and truth as well. How do I share the truth of God's word in a kind way, in a gracious way, without watering it down and pulling the punches? How do I find that balance? How do I be like Jesus? And I think the passage before us this morning, as we see Nehemiah's character, and even as he reflects the greater character of Christ, as Christ, he was silent as a sheep before his shearers, and yet we know he is coming back again, and this time he's not bringing peace but a sword. And so can we find a balance? And I think this passage shows us that, where we can go to the Lord, trusting him in protecting us, praying, Lord, take care of our enemies, and then also understanding that he might do that through us as well. Not to keep ranting, it was a great class at RTS Washington, but it was called Justice and War. It was a wonderful class, seminary class. You're talking about justice, you're talking about war, and a biblical understanding of justice. It's holy, it's perfection, it's right all the time. And you talk about God's justice and God's wrath and his punishment of sin, and then you think about war. How do you keep the peace with evil people? You have to essentially make them not want to cause war. And how do you love your neighbor and all of that? And one of the illustrations they used, and I volunteered, and so the illustration became very personal for me. They were like, David, you're a pastor, all right? And he gave two. He's like, one, so you come home from the grocery store or whatever, there's an intruder, and he is just beating up on Amber. Hard. Beating. He doesn't care if she lives or not. He's trying to get the money. He came in. Like, they're both your neighbor. How do you love your neighbor? I'm like, that's a great question. Because he's my neighbor. The guy wailing on my wife. Loving Amber as my neighbor means I need to get this guy off of her, and I might have to beat him up too, very badly. I'm not the aggressor. Loving him is making him stop doing the evil that he's doing. I'm being loving by making you stop doing the evil that you're doing. And then other illustration, you're a pastor. Churches are not immune. We're out in the country, and so it's pretty safe. And I don't want to be under the illusion, though, that nothing could ever happen ever. It's like, David, someone comes in, you have no idea, what are you going to do? You're going to, I'll probably pray, but while I'm running at the guy. Like David, when he sees lions approaching his sheep, he doesn't go, Lord, get the lions away. He says, I'll take care of business. And this is what Nehemiah does, where, do I just stay back and say, Lord, take care of Sanballat, take care of Tobiah, and just get them out of my life? Or do we fight back? Maybe it's a little bit of both. And so what we see in this passage is that the Lord protects his people, and sometimes he protects them by calling them into action and to be ready to defend themselves, to keep on mission. So this is kind of fun to talk about. You don't always hear sermons on self-defense sometimes. But here we go. Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 14. It says, "Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, 'What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish it up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that?' And then Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him and said, 'Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads, and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight. For they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders.' And so we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward, and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. In Judah it was said, 'The strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall.' And our enemies said, 'They will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work.' At that time the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, 'You must return to us.' So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, 'Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes.'" This is the word of God for the people of God. And so this is such a fun passage. Because it's like, here you are, you see that like enemies are here, they're jeering at them, they're saying horrible, horrible things. And then you also see them praying to God, hey, let their own taunt come back on their heads. Don't let what they're saying come true to us, but true about them. And then also, Lord, prepare us as we remember you if we might have to actually stand and defend what we're building here. And so this theme, it's also in Nehemiah chapter 2, it's also here chapter 4 and later in chapter 6. But we know, as God's people, as we want his kingdom to advance, we pray for the kingdom to expand, that the gospel and his glory and his ministry would conquer over the whole world. We know that as we pray that prayer, the opposition obviously is not going to like that very much. Satan, the sinful world, sinful people, they do not love the Lord. They do not like Christianity, and so their tactics are definitely going to be present. They will adapt with us. And so we need to be serious. We don't always talk about spiritual warfare all the time. And sometimes we talk about physical warfare even less. I'm not telling you to go home and get the shotgun and come back next Sunday. But are we aware that, like, hey, Jesus said that the world will hate us because it hated him first? Do we remind ourselves that, oh yeah, you know what? It's actually grace that we make it a single day when this world is out to get us, between sickness, Kids that drive without insurance and hit the back of my car. Goodness, another strand of COVID, elections, major world powers, you name it. And they're just out to get us. And so I think we need a passage like this that reminds us the Lord is on our side, but he doesn't just do everything for us. He also wants us to participate with him. It's his strength, it's his power, but he wants us to join in and not just watch on the sidelines. And so what we see in this first section, verses 1 through 6, Nehemiah prays. We have prayer in progress, and then we also have prayer and protection. So here we see Nehemiah's prayer, and then they are able to make progress. If you're reading from the ESV like me, it's actually verses 1 through 6 is 2 paragraphs. The first one's full of a bunch of taunts from Sanballat and Tobiah. But then they have this beautiful paragraph, one sentence, but it gets its own paragraph about how they still, 2 sentences, how they were able to still build the wall and be joined together because the people had a mind to work. So there's prayer and progress despite all these jeerings. And so if we could place ourselves, you don't have to close your eyes, but if we could just, we're placing ourselves there. You have these Israelites, they're finally building and constructing their walls once again. You can imagine a bunch of masons, and they're using their tools and their chisels. They're cutting huge pieces of stone, and they're trying to place it just right because the architects are like, Nehemiah, I think it's supposed to go over there. And he's like, yeah, it sounds good. Keep building. But in the gates that have been destroyed by fire, they're now being repaired. And we talked about some of the desolation you see on the news, kind of everything that's going on in Hawaii. It's just like, completely wiped out, total rubble. And you see that and you're like, the devastation and the sadness. And then imagine, I think it's going to take some time, but when Maui can finally start, I don't know, building back better. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Building back their homes. And it's finally starting to come together, and the city's starting to look like a city again. And you can imagine the joy that, hey, we're finally having a home. It's back. It's not the same way as it used to be, but we're getting somewhere. And then right when they have finally risen, as we learned about last week, we were able to rise and we've been able to rebuild. You have Sanballat and Tobiah, and here they are, and they approach them once again, and this is not their first encounter. Verse 10 of chapter 2, we learn that they actually greatly displeased that Nehemiah wanted to do any good in Jerusalem. Then in chapter 2, verse 19, they raised the specter of sedition and rebellion. You are rebellious against the king, even though they had Artaxerxes' approval. And then here we see actual progress. And we learn in verse 1 that not only when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry, greatly enraged, but he also jeered at the Jews. He gave verbal assaults. He said in verse 2, he said in the presence of his brothers in the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? And then he asks several rhetorical questions. And so his main purpose is just to completely destroy the morale that these builders might have had. First, as a personal attack, he calls them feeble Jews. I don't take too kindly to that. I would take that personally if I were them. At one point, he might have been right. The Jews and Israelites, they weren't always strong. In Egypt, they were slaves for 400 years. In the wilderness, they were wandering, and then even having been conquered and in exile. But at this point, they are not feeble Jews. They are rising. They are rebuilding. They are on mission for the Lord with Nehemiah as their head. And so they are not feeble Jews. But then he goes on, and he doesn't just attack them personally, but he literally asks, are they going to be able to restore it for themselves? As in, like, are you sure you're going to be able to do this yourself? It's a question of their competence. In short, he's going, can 41 work details actually be composed and put together by clergy and laymen and tradesmen. You don't have actual professional contractors that do this, make this a true functioning and defensive structure. This is just so weak. So weak. Then he asks, will they be able to sacrifice? And this question actually, it indirectly addresses whether, if they get done, you celebrate the building of a wall, you celebrate the building of a temple with a celebration, with a feast. And then you make sacrifices because you praise the Lord for what he did for you. And so they're mocking them that you're not even going to be able to worship the Lord because you're not going to be able to get this done. So you're not even going to be able to have sacrifice and praise the Lord because of this, because you will never finish. And he says, will you even finish it in a day? And so he just implies on the other end, maybe they're hopeful, and it's like, hey, we can build this. It's like, you can't build it. And then he mocks them, will you finish it in a day? Where now you can't win for losing, and you're just not being realistic about whether you can actually build this or not. And then this last question about, will they revive the stones of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? Materials, if you don't harvest them, it's an agrarian society. So if you don't harvest the materials, you don't have them. And so it's not like resources are just at their disposal, despite Artaxerxes. He helped with the wood for the gates, but are you just going to fix this burned stone to not look like it's burned stone anymore? You're going to really, and when you burn them, they're weakened. And so it's like, you're really going to try to rebuild a wall with these same old stones that you found here. And so it's so fragile, and to the point where Tobiah can even mock them further in verse 3, that yes, what they're building, if a fox even goes on it, he will break down their stone wall. I don't know if you've seen a fox lately, but they're not that big. And so that is definitely, they are discouraging. They are saying everything they can to make them stop working, to be discouraged, and to just feel low, to feel hopeless, if you will. And so Nehemiah, he does a much better job than I think a lot of us would, but definitely better than me. I probably would have spoken exactly what was on my mind, exactly what I was feeling. I would have, oops, I dropped one of the burned stones on you. We'll see how weak it is when it falls on you. Sorry. But that's not how he responds. And I would have been annoyed. I would have been irritated. I definitely, would have wanted to say a piece of my mind. But actually, Nehemiah, this is not what he does. He actually prays to the Lord. In verses 4 and 5, he says, hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt. Let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. And so sometimes we can forget the promise that God made to Abraham, where it's like, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. You reap what you sow. And it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but there are folks where one day, and the Lord will have the final say, where he takes this personally. You remember Jesus when he confronts Paul. He says, why are you persecuting me? And he's like, who are you, Lord, and why do you say that I persecute you? Because the Lord is so closely affiliated with the sheep that he has spilt his blood for, that we see here that Nehemiah is able to pray this prayer. Lord, take the words that they are saying, put it back on their own heads. You're the one that forgives sins. Don't cover their guilt. Don't blot out their sins. See them. They are unrighteous. They have provoked you to anger because they are taunting and jeering at us, and they're trying to get us to stop doing the work that you have called us to. So the enemies hear of Nehemiah's work on the wall, and so he asks God to hear their taunts and vindicate his feeble people that serve a very unfeeble God. And it's amazing to see that it was actually also, why does Nehemiah pray? Why doesn't he drop the stone, on these people? Why doesn't he point the finger at them? Why doesn't he answer all of their rhetorical questions in anger? Like, why does he just move to prayer? Why doesn't he fight back right away? Well, he doesn't want to bring more shame on this people. You ever have that where it's like, it accomplishes whatever you're trying to do, it accomplishes the exact opposite of what you were hoping it would. I saw a car the other day where the bumper sticker, now I happen to be able to see it, thankfully, to make this reference. But it's a bumper sticker that if you're reading this and I'm passing you in the right lane, like, you're the problem. Because apparently, yeah, if I have to pass you in the right lane, you're the problem. That's what it said. And I was like, I'm in the left lane. Amber, drive faster. No. But it was interesting because those folks that have those types of bumper stickers, they really like to make a point of like swerving over, flooring it, and swerving back over in front of you, and flying away where you can't really even read the bumper sticker in the first place. So it's like, I guess they're just really mad. Bad illustration, but it didn't accomplish the purpose that they wanted it to. You read my bumper sticker, you get that you're a problem, and then you get over. It's like, it's a wonder I even managed to be able to read the bumper sticker because you were going so fast. I think Nehemiah, if he just was to give in to what Sanballat and Tobiah wanted all along. They want to rile this people up. Whatever gets them to stop doing the work. If you're mad, discouraged, whatever it takes, just stop working. Which is very much how Satan works too. Half the time, he doesn't have to be that creative at all. Just whatever it takes to get us to stop. And so Nehemiah prays to the Lord, asks God to find his guilty opponents as actually being guilty, not forgiving their iniquity. And so he prays, but they're able to make great progress because they are able to build the wall in verse 6. And all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. They had a mind to work. But it doesn't stop there. We have the rest of the passage, verses 7 through 14, prayer and protection. So they pray and they're able to make progress despite opposition, but the opposition continues. It does not stop, and so they actually need protection now. It looks like, is prayer not enough? Is prayer not going to cut it? I can't just pray and then I just sit back and watch. We actually see this second scene. It moves from report that the adversaries heard, that the community now responds in prayer, but then actually they have to have a defensive strategy. Seeing that our jeering didn't work, seeing that our taunts didn't work, now we might actually have to physically threaten them. And so here we have them binding up this wall, being joined together, and the people had a mind to work, and they are repairing the walls, and they're going forward. And even verse 7, we're learning that the breaches were beginning to be closed, and so they were very angry. And what's interesting about the word repairing here, it's actually a really rare noun. It doesn't happen all that much. It's called aruka. Sorry, I got to do the phlegm. If you're going to do Hebrew, you got to have phlegm. Aruka, which means repairing, but it's also found in Jeremiah when it's talking about repairing health and stamina and energy and hope after the exile. So they're actually being built up, and they're repairing the walls, not just in a physical sense where it's like, great, we took 2 pieces of stone, we took a piece of wood, and now we have a wall. but it's also it's repairing the people as a whole. There's something nice, and we kind of see what's going on right now. It's nice to have a wall. It's nice to have security. It means safety. It means whatever's out there is going to have a lot harder time trying to get in here. And they don't have, ADT and Alexa and home security systems where you can just arm the city. If you're going to arm the city, you have to have actual people with arms. And so this is hope. We are no longer in exile. We are no longer a people without a home, as our Old Testament reading, Rising and Rebuilding last week, where we are no longer a city forsaken. We are building again. But it's interesting because Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, they heard that we were repairing the walls and going forward. They were very angry. Verse 8, they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And what's kind of amazing is so they are being rebuilt as a people, not just a wall, but as a people. They're joining together, but at the same time, these enemies are joining together, working and conspiring together to go against God's people. And, we could just read these names and be like, okay, Sanballat, Arabs, and Ammonites, and Ashdodites. But when you really look at it, these people groups, they actually signify the four directions, like on a compass. They're actually completely surrounded. Samaria is in the north. They've been joined by the Arabs that are in the south. The Ammonites were in the east, and the Ashdodites were in the west. And so we're not just reading okay, it's a people group. You have to understand, these are the surrounding people groups, and you have the Israelites in the middle, and they are all ready to come against them. And so what do? You have two individuals that cannot stand that you're there. They don't want you to be successful. They've managed to rally around everybody that's around you to come against you. Their jeering has not worked, so we now must go to war against them, fight against Jerusalem, and to cause confusion in it. And I read this, and I'm like, they want to take out the feeble people, and all people at some point, even us. We come to a time in which our energy has been completely expended. We no longer have the strength that we once had. And this is what's happening with them when their work begins to slow. They pray in verse 9. They prayed to God. They set a guard as protection against them day and night. But even despite that, it was said that the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall. Our enemies said that they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work, so that's a surprise. And then at that time the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, "You must return to us." And so we have all of this opposition, all of these threats, and then you have 3 more temptations lumped on top of that for them to be tempted to quit the work. Verse 10, we learn that those who are bearing the burdens, their strength is gone. There's so much rubble, it's so much to move. They're tired, and so this is difficult labor. Then verse 11, we see more taunts, and the enemies are really getting to them, and they're causing discouragement. They're saying that they're even, they're going to kill us. They're going to get us, and they're not going to stop until we stop the work. And they're going to sneak up on us. They're going to do it when we least expect it. We have to be prepared. It's not worth it. And then even on top of that, they had their own countrymen, fellow Israelites, but they didn't come back after the exile. And they're going, why are you putting up with all this? Why are you dealing with all of this? It's not worth it. You should come back and live with us instead. Don't return to Jerusalem. Return back to us. The work is not worth it. And so the people are tempted to cease. And so Nehemiah is vigilant. He's a good leader. He cares about God. He cares about God's people. He cares about God's mission. In an interesting way, he actually is kind of strategic in how he responds to the opposition. And I think this might be really good wisdom for us, where we don't not fight, we don't not pray, but maybe we can find a balance. That's what Nehemiah actually does. He calls a stop to the work, interestingly enough. He says, you know what, we are going to stop working completely. No more work, no more hammering, no more chiseling, no more moving stones. And this is what we're going to do. While we wait, while we rest, we are going to go, as verse 13 says, we're going to go to the lowest parts of the space that's behind the wall. So they can't see us. They can't see where we're working. They don't know where we are. And then we're going to go into the open places. And I stationed the people by their clans, so they're with their families, and with their swords, and their spears, and their bows. It's amazing. He gets them to be unified, a poised people, ready for conflict if it comes. And that any advantage of a surprise attack, it's been lost. Because you don't know where we are now. And actually where we are, we know the city. When you come in, you're not going to know where we are, which is amazing. And we're going to rest and be prepared and not be feeble Jews. We will be ready and no longer vulnerable. And to the point where he can say in verse 14, literally it encapsulates both these ideas. I looked and arose, and I said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. And so he adopts a different tactic where he stops the work. These people think that they got what they wanted. Yay, the Jews have given up. They're scared of us. They have lost and we have won. And so what happens is that he's not implying a lack of trust in God. Obviously, he says to the people, remember the Lord, for he is great and awesome. But he also recognizes that to fight for one's family, to fight for those who are precious to you, and even your home, is wise in a world where people seek to cause harm to God's people. Therefore, I think we should use resources at our disposal, mentally, physically, that God gives us to protect ourselves, our families, our homes, and yes, our churches. And so I think whether that means we fix the plumbing, whether it means we have nice security systems that, used to go off during service, that was always fun. Even we have other, I know of other folks where they even have folks that are able to take up actual arms against intruders and those who would wish to cause us harm. That is there a balance where you could pray against the evil in this world, that God would do whatever it takes, and then also know that that doesn't mean you have to be passive and let nothing ever happen, ever. In that same Justice and War class, it was interesting. He led a group, it was study abroad trip, and they were looking at Auschwitz. They were touring the concentration camp from the Holocaust, and one of the worst ones, if not the worst. And he was leading a group of seminary students through the grounds, and they were essentially, one of the comments made by one of the students was, "This is horrible. Such evil, such horrid things happened here. And, as a Christian, I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it." And he said, "What do you mean?" And the young lady was like, "Well, war is bad. And, I wouldn't have been able to fight against this because I'm supposed to step back and not fight evil with evil. I'm supposed to pray for them and be passive. And which sparked the whole why he started the class in the first place. I was like, we shouldn't think, oh, that is so bad. It's a shame I can't do anything about it. The Lord has given us blessings, especially living in the United States of America, where we have freedom of speech. We have freedom of religion. We have other freedoms that protect those freedoms. And the Lord allows us where we can pray to him, Lord, deliver us from this evil. Christ, our King, you're the one that is our defender. You are our shepherd that fights off the lions for us. Help us to be able to defend the defenseless. When the enemies are jeering at us, help us to go to you first, but also to be ready that when the schemes of the evil one come at us, that we're able to stand together, hunker down, and to protect us and those who need us, the weak, the humble, the weary, the lame, the broken, and to bring them where they can find protection and find safety. Because a day's coming where we won't have to pick up rubble and build with charged stones and labor and struggle, but we will be called to a holy city, the city of God, where we learn that there is no darkness because he is our light, that there actually is a wall but no gates, which means perfect security, no evil in this world. But until that time comes, we know that we must be ready, we must be vigilant, and praying to the Lord, remembering him, but as we also seek to fight for each other and our families and our lives and our homes. Amen.